everybody's got their own opinion of players. They might have played one hand with you where you made a terrible call, and then for the rest of their life, you're an awful player.
The Interview by PokerOrg.
Welcome to The Interview here with Barney Boatman. Barney just became a PokerStars pro at the age of 68. Am I right? 68?
Why do people keep bringing that up? Yeah, 68.
I hate it when people bring my age up too, so I'm really sorry, Barney. I never say my age out loud, and I won't today either. But Barney just won the EPT Paris event not too long ago. We're going to talk about that today. Also about his origin story of the Hendon mob, which everybody goes to check their results. And Barney's long career in the game, he's watched it evolve over the years. And I want to know how he feels about it, the evolution of the game, how he's kept up, because I watched his final table and it was pretty amazing to watch him take on the young guns and even some of the old guys. So it was a lot of fun. Welcome, Barney, to The Interview.
Thank you. I like that idea of origin story. It makes me sound like a superhero.
Well, I think everybody, when I was watching it, our editor Dave Woods came on the WhatsApp and said, everybody's watching Barney. We're all rooting for him over here to win. And it was really cool to see all those people behind you to win that game. How did it feel there at the table to have so much support?
It was lovely. I was aware of it. I was aware of it because of WhatsApp messages and Twitter and people calling me up. There weren't that many people that I knew actually there, but I felt the love, and it really does help a lot. You know, it makes you feel relaxed and at home, and I was very comfortable.
Yeah, I could tell some of the moves you were making were pretty extraordinary and fun to watch. Getting people to fold, especially the hand we're going to talk about in some future articles. Pretty cool. Tell us a little bit about, because I was reading your bio and doing some research on you, and I've obviously known about you for a long, long time since I began writing about 20 years ago for poker, and followed the Hendon mob and all you guys. Tell us a little bit about the origin before we jump into the PokerStars tournament, the origin of the Hendon mob, and then you guys went on to be on a TV series, one of the first on poker, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Hendon mob was like a real thing. It wasn't a made up. I mean, there were the term mob is applied very loosely in the UK to any group of people that could be associated with anything, particularly a place.
Okay.
So there was the Birmingham mob, there was the Scouse mob, the Glasgow mob, whatever, and we were a group of people who, my brother Ross and I used to play in a game in Archway where we lived, and I kind of always thought Archway mob sounded cooler than Hendon mob, um, but we but we gravitated. That game was more of a fun game, friendly game, and as we got more serious, we started gravitating to another game in Hendon, um, which was run by this guy Joe Beavers, who ran it more like what we call a spieler, like a little business, and he had the regular player in the game that was always there was Ram Baswani.
Right.
So once Ross and I started playing in there every week, and Joe and Ram was always there, we got identified by other people. When we showed up somewhere else, people said, "Oh, here comes the Hendon mob,"
Right.
So that was that. But the thing was that we identified quite early, I think, something cultural that was happening with poker. I mean, actually, I don't often talk about this, but I attempted something a few years earlier, back in the early to mid '90s, where my sister was involved with something called Channel Siberia, which was there was a cafe, a site. It was called Cafe Siberia, and that was like it was probably the first internet cafe in the UK, and they had this concept. The people who ran that thing had this concept of doing like an interactive kind of TV channel on the internet, and the internet was nothing then. It was dial up. There was nothing, virtually nothing on it. So this concept was very new, and they invited a number of people to come up with channels. But basically there were pages that were dedicated to certain areas where they thought they could produce content and maybe get sponsorship.
Okay.
And I came up with this thing that was. There was one about fashion. There was one about pop music. A lot of them looked great, but I came up with this thing called Play the Game, which was about games and gambling, and it was a board game, and you moved around the board, and when you went into one, there was this thing called Fantasy Punters League where people did did betting on things, and there was another one that told poker stories, and another one about horse racing, another about chess. It was all games and gambling, and you were supposed to, if you produced one of these things, you were supposed to come up with an idea of who might put the money in and sponsor it. And I said, well, I think that the betting companies might be interested in this. So they went to them, and it was a hard no. They didn't know what it was, didn't understand. Anyway, for one reason or another, the whole thing never took off. But I already had this idea. This was like 1994 or something, and I had this idea that poker was going to be a thing. But anyway, we talked as a group about the fact that poker was getting more. I mean, I think in the US it was always a big cultural thing, and in Ireland maybe more. I mean, there was always poker, but it was like a little underground thing, like in the games we were playing in, and then there was some tournaments in casinos. But we were identified ourselves as a group and started a website to try and promote the game and ourselves. And we got invited onto late night poker in the late 90s because we were all known players. And a lot of the older, I mean, because believe it or not, I was one of the young guys then. A lot of the older players,
Okay.
they were invited to go on this show, and they didn't see the value in it. They were like, why would I show my hands? I'm playing with my own money. Why would I, as a form of entertainment, let people know and they had a point, but
Yeah, for
for
sure.
me, it was different, particularly because I was actually a 7-card stud player. That was what I was known for. And that was the reason I've been invited on was because of my success in that area. So to go on and play a game where they were only going to show a handful of hands, and it was a kind of short stack one table format that we didn't normally play anyway, and it was a game that I didn't really uh, have much deep knowledge of, which was No Limit Hold'em. So I was happy to go on because it was fun and it was part of what was happening, and we thought we would promote ourselves, and it worked out in time. It did work. It took a long time. It felt like a long time anyway
Right.
to get. I guess it wasn't really, but we, by the time we got sponsorship, we kind of figured that another, a group of younger, better looking people than us were going to be getting it. But I think it was the website that swung it. That made us interesting to commercial sponsors.
But you were just sort of listing the top players that you knew. It wasn't turning into the tracking site that it has evolved into at that time, right?
Well, yes, that's the thing. It was started out as just a fanzine about poker and about us, and we didn't take ourselves that seriously, or at least 3 of the 4 of us didn't. I would say, it's fair to say, and because Ram was very, very good,
He is
but
very good.
like we sent ourselves up a bit, and we promoted the game, and then what happened was we got a little deal with an online betting company, a betting exchange, to entice people to their product by doing a book on poker on the major poker tournaments in Europe. And what we did was we wrote a little form guide of maybe the top 50 to 100 players that tended to be, because in those days it was always the same people wherever you went.
Right.
And we wrote a little spiel about them, and we put a little thing about their results, and that was to give people an idea of, a form guide, who to, and we made a book on these events. Um, and then people would come up to us, why aren't I in? Or you forgot that I was third in that thing. And what do we want a picture of me? The picture you've got isn't very good. I've got a better one. And, people started coming to us with content. And we soon realized that, this was the thing that people were most interested. They weren't interested in us for some reason. They were interested in the game and in themselves. And then the thing about what we were doing was we were contributing to the ethos of making poker into a sport, where people could measure themselves against each other, and um, so and that was conscious to quite an extent. I mean, we did things like we came up with challenges, um, heads up challenges, and wherever we went as a group, we, it was kind of like who have you got? Who's the best? We're going to take you on, and we'll get someone will put up a prize. So we went to Australia and we did the poker ashes against the top Australians, and then Shane Warne, who was a great cricketer who was into poker, he he um, he barbecued the hat that the Australian team captain wore, Billy the Croc. He barbecued his crocodile hat, and that became the Poker Ashes. And we played a top American team when we were in Monte Carlo. We played an Irish team. We played a French team. So we were always doing. It was kind of about promoting ourselves, but it was also about promoting the game and the idea that it was a sport and that and it was fun. And although it's always an individual thing, and it's the integrity of the game is very important. There were ways of bringing people together and getting people to root for, a group of people and just kind of play for each other in the sense that they were getting points for their team or whatever. So,
Right.
so we were very much, I would say, in the forefront of that. Um, and then of course, the internet boomed, and that was going to happen.
Of
I
course.
don't claim um, uh, any role in making poker happen. It was happening anyway, but we kind of we rode the wave to some extent.
Do you have some favorite players over in your across the seas here from the U.S. like Marcel or anybody you like to play it up against, Mr. Lusk and players like that? Did you have any nemesises over there in the game? Were
Well,
you look
funny
forward to
enough,
playing you?
I would say back then my biggest nemesis was actually Ram Baswani, who was one of the four of us. He was the one player I'd never seemed to be able to beat. When however far ahead I was when the money went in, didn't matter. Um, but no, I mean they there were great players from Scandinavia. There were a lot of great Irish players, um, and a lot of them became friends. Not that many players from that era are still playing as much as I am, and I haven't even
Right.
been playing that much in recent years, but playing a bit more now. But yeah, it was different then because, like I say, if you went round the European circuit, there were the main events would have kind of like 100 players playing in them,
Right.
and they might be they might be $1,500 kind of level entry, and so you could become the champion of Finland and pick up 25 grand or something like that. It was a lot of money.
Yeah, of
The
course.
only reason it doesn't seem like a lot of money now is because there's so much more in the game. But we were delighted if we got that kind of money, playing a game. It's wonderful.
How much did the players over in the U.S. or were you because there was no internet? You're probably reading about them in the magazines or TV or some sort of newspapers. How much did the U.S. game and people like Doyle and Amarillo Slim affect the way you guys were approaching the game, especially when Super System came out with a very aggressive
Well,
play? You guys were the
Amaral,
youngest,
yeah, I don't know how old you think I am. I think that I played once or twice with those guys, but the guys that I was more aware of when I started going over there were the likes of Negrano and Helmuth.
right?
I mean, I remember actually, I remember being sitting down in the tournament, and Amarillo Slim was at the table, and he played a hand with some guy, some young American guy, and on the river, Slim bet, and the guy called the last of his chips with the absolute nut low, couldn't possibly win, and he turned his hand over like 4-3 off suit or whatever, and he just said, "I just wanted to say that I was knocked out by Amarillo Slim," and I thought, wow, that's a that's an edge that I never imagined you could have in this game, and that's a very American thing, I think, because whereas the Americans tend to worship success, we tend to be very fond of underdogs and failure, and the idea that you would deliberately give your chips like that was extraordinary. I mean, obviously, we knew about Doyle Bronson, and he was the best of the best, and but like. Um, and I came up against him here and there later on. But I remember, being at the table a lot with both Negrano and Helmuth, who in their different ways were both way ahead of their time and very good, very interesting in the way that they played.
Well, what affected your game? Because I know Super System, a lot of people talk about it, and obviously Phil and Daniel also were big influences. I'm not saying you're old. I'm not saying. I was just
Oh,
curious.
you can say it. Yes,
Like,
right.
I've got gray hair too. I got it. Yeah, you don't even have gray hair. What's going on? So I was just
I'll
curious
say.
how Super System in the game evolved for you as far as seeing these young guns these days, even beyond Phil and Daniel, take the game to another level with the solvers and the things they're doing in tournament play today. And you certainly kept up with them or surpassed them in this past tournament watching you play. So how has it been? Tell me about the evolvement of the game in your mind and how you approach the game differently throughout the years as you saw it change.
Well, I mean, one of the things about when we learned to play was, there weren't okay. There was a couple of books and that I wasn't even necessarily aware of, but there certainly there certainly wasn't, under the table cameras and stuff like that. Never mind uh, real time assistance and solvers and all those things. And a lot of the stuff that you did, nobody ever saw,
Right.
and you never saw, unless someone rolled their hands over. You never saw their hands. Everybody lied, obviously, about what they had. And so I think it was. I think that a very different kind of player was suited to that environment. People who made it up as they went along and were prepared to look stupid. I mean, maybe that's hasn't changed, but certainly you learnt it a lot more by trial and error in those days, and I think that to some extent, partly due to sheer laziness, I've taken I've taken that approach as far as I could possibly take it in terms of I'm very aware of what people are doing in the game and how bet sizings change and people play different spots in a different way and people min click back in certain circumstances and I see what's going on, um, and I try and cook up in my head ways that will work in dealing with that stuff. I mean, the game. I don't claim to have. Well, for one thing, I don't claim to be an elite player. I'm a player whose style didn't particularly fit in the old days or now. It's not. I'm not of a particular time in a way,
Right.
but I developed through experience, and I don't study as much as I ought to. I talk to people here and there, but um, I like to think that I understand the concepts,
Right.
the language has grown up, and I can distinguish between where it's just another way of describing the same thing, and where there are lots of very new and interesting concepts. Um, I mean, I do think that sometimes, quite often, I arrive at a similar line to somebody uh, who has got there through a lot more deeper understanding of some of the maths. And when I see, because lately I've been watching a bit of um, uh, the streams and listening to some of the commentary by people who are really good who know what's going on, and sometimes I kind of think, oh wow. When I'm talking about when I was a hand I was in, is
Yeah.
that why I did that? I was yeah okay, but it's true. If you'd held me down, if you'd held me down and got me to explain it, that might have been what I said. But like at the time, it all happened too quickly for me to have had all those thoughts. So I mean, yeah, I think I might be a bit of an anomaly in a way, in that like I've been kind of bloody minded about not. I mean, I think it's difficult, and certainly to start with, I think there's a danger if you go back and start to pick apart and and learn what the solver says you should do in certain spots, you're certainly going to get worse for a while, even if you get better in the end. And I think the key, I mean, I was a teacher at one time, and the key about teaching that you had to have the right moment to introduce an idea and a concept, which is, and in teaching, that's usually when someone asks a question. You know, but the idea that you can learn the game by memorizing all the spots, all that the solvers tell you about, is a bit like thinking you can learn a language by memorizing every phrase that might ever come up. You
Right.
know, you might get by ordering a cup of tea and asking directions, but then someone's going to tell a joke and you're not going to understand it.
Who are the young guns you like to watch these
Oh
days?
wow!
You watch like
I mean,
people that you admire, or just like, wow, that's interesting to watch. You've got some great people playing in the Tritons, obviously, in the high rollers.
yeah, well, people like Martin Chittick, who seems to be of an absolutely different, you know, off a
Chidwick.
different planet. So, yes, the same might say. By the way, you'll realise we go along. I'm rubbish with names, which is
That's okay.
which is a problem when you ask questions like that. But like I've been for a long time a great admirer of a lot of the young British players, and not just because they're great players, but because but a lot of them are great people. I'm kind of more interested in what people are as people, but certainly, you know, I mean, if I had to pick out one time when a really young player really blew me away, and I said, "Wow, this is this is this is changing everything," sort of thing. It was actually when Annette Obrestad won
Yeah,
the World Series of Poker Europe main event
yeah,
at an age, 3 years before she was able even legally to play in Vegas.
yeah,
And not only as young as you could possibly be, and even physically be there and play, but to be a woman playing at a time when that was still very rare, and there was still, I'm not saying there aren't still challenges, but there were a lot more challenges. So she was facing an enormous amount, and she was so fearless and so smart, and played the game so differently as far as I could see. And every now and again, somebody comes along like that, and you just have to stand there and just admire it. And there are. I mean, one of the things about poker is everybody's got their own opinion of players. And a lot of it depends on their own experience. People, they might have played one hand with you, where you made a terrible call, and then for the rest of their life you're an awful player, or they might have seen the opposite. They might have seen an amazing move, and then they won't hear anything against you. You're a genius because they saw this one thing. And poker is a game of opinions, like a lot of sports are. And however much you can produce hand and mob lists and say, look who's won this, look who's won that. We all know that how much luck there is in that, how much you don't know what else was going on, how many things people play. So it's incredibly subjective, and that's one of the things that keeps the game going. But I could rattle off names of people, um, there's Chris De Silva is a guy, and Yanis Liperis. They're two. They're not even that young anymore. Some of these, I call them they're a lot younger than me. But there's players who are coming through, who maybe haven't quite come through yet, or have had a couple of big results that I'm aware of. And some of them are friends, and I like to talk hands with them now and again, and ask a bit of advice here and there. So yeah, I think that you can always learn more from people who are at a certain point where they're really, really intense. They're really thinking about the game. They haven't just got stuck in their ways yet. And if I've done anything smart, it's that I've always known that I don't really know that much, and I like to talk to other people.
yeah. I think there's a famous line: "A true sage knows that he knows nothing." So then you're
Ah,
open.
well, okay.
You're open to
Ah,
everything.
I know a bit more than that.
You don't know a bit more than nothing. I have to read something I saw on your wiki page. It's your sense of humor, but I just was laughed when I read this out loud. I said Barney Bowman left school due to pressure from his ongoing truancy
Yeah.
early on. So I said, so you
Um,
left. You were creating, stirring up controversy even back then, and moving on to the things you wanted to do. Talk about your childhood and your schooling, and what drove you in this direction of enjoying this kind of complex life or fun life with gambling and poker. Because I began playing mixed games too, like in high school, right? I didn't know No Limit until I moved to Los Angeles and saw two cards at the casino here, right? So talk about that. You left school early on, about your childhood a bit there. Your
yeah, I did get expelled, but because I just wasn't going. I wasn't interested, and you know, I was. I think, you know, although I say so myself, I think I was a bright kid, but articulate
clearly,
and quite mouthy and interested in a lot of things. But I had difficulty with something with study. I mean, um, I think what they would now call dyslexia, although I've never been diagnosed, I'm kind of reasonably convinced that that's something that I have. But like, you know, certainly my writing was absolutely illegible. So even though I knew what I was saying, nobody else did. Um, I was, I would do anything rather than do something I was told to do. So I never did my homework. Uh, but I mean, it was a shame, in a way, because I sort of wanted to get educated, but I didn't get on with school at all, and so I did leave um, at 16, which was the, the youngest age you could leave then, and did a lot of jobs. I'll, if ever I try and list them, I never remember them all because there were so many. Um, but and a lot of traveling actually, and I lived and worked in a lot of different countries. I always had this interest in. I actually invented a couple of board games which I tried to get companies interested in, and one of them appeared later in lots of other forms that I hadn't managed to protect it intellectually. Another one never got anywhere at all. At school, I used to gamble. We used to play penny against the wall. Whoever got the penny closest to the wall would get the
yeah.
money, and with cards, flicking cards against the wall. And we played three card brag, which is very kind of rudimentary form of not even poker exact. Well, it was three card poker, but it was like ridiculous. It was just all gambling, um, no subtlety involved. Um,
Who
so
introduced you to poker? But who introduced you to poker then? How did
well,
that
you know
evolve?
what? Me and Ross, my brother, we both blame our uncle Con. He taught us a game called Newmarket, which we used to play at Christmas, and it's a kind of a gamble. It's a gambling game where you basically have to get rid of all your cards out of your hand, and whoever gets rid of their cards first scoops the pot. And then you've got these four cards, which are horses that you bet on. If you got that card, you manage to lay it down, you get the money on that.
Okay,
And we loved that. and So I don't know if that was. I mean, that was certainly the first card game that I played for money. Nothing to do with poker whatsoever.
right.
I played with friends at school from pretty young, but like it remained a little thing in the background and a little hobby or whatever for years, I guess, until um, so I taught Ross to play, and because we both had apartments in the same house, so we hung out a lot together, um, and we started having this regular game, and then Ross became an actor and was doing pretty well, and then he would invite some of his mates who were actors to come to the game, and we kind of broadened the scope of who we played with, and then one of the things that happened was that we found out about tournament poker, and this was the real turning point for me because I was the first one of our little group to go and join the Victoria Casino in London, and there was a £20 7 card stud tournament. It was the first one I've ever played, and I won it.
Wow.
And then I went back the following week and chopped it. And so I just thought I was some sort of a genius, which obviously I just clearly just ran ridiculously well in those 2 weeks.
Right.
But it was enough to give me a taste, because the buzz, obviously, of finishing up with all the chips and then getting this check for £2,000 or whatever it was just so exciting, and it was a lot of money, and so that kind of after that, we all started playing these small tournaments quite a lot. So that was, that moved us out of just playing in our own little circle
Right.
and we were getting invited to other people's games. So it became a bigger part. And actually, in the 90s, I was working as a computer programmer, and I was being sent around the world quite a lot with that. I worked in Sri Lanka and Hong Kong, briefly in Australia. Um, but when I was working in London, which was most of the time, I found myself in a situation where I was, playing all night and winning or losing a couple of grand, and then working all day and earning, whatever it was, a couple of hundred or whatever it was at the time, and it just didn't add up. It was like, I felt like I needed to give the poker a proper go. So when I won this tournament in Slovenia, 7 card stud tournament, I got £8,000 for that, and that was just an enormous amount of money
Wow.
to me. And I said, okay, I'll give up the job for a while, take this with me, and I carried that same money around with me all over the place, all over Europe, and just kind of never ran out. It
Right.
worked out. I think I just got lucky enough early enough to give me a taste for it, and to give me a cushion so that I could keep playing.
Well, that sounds like the path. I mean, you're just describing the path of many of our superstars today. Many of them were in college. Many of them dropped out of college to pursue the game or quit a job. It's the same thing going with some of the top young guns that are now like in their late 30s. Like a
Yeah.
Jason, I can't remember Jason Kuhn graduated, but those kind of Stephen Chidwick, all those young guys, Ike, all those young guys we have now. But when online poker came along, how fast did you get involved in playing online, or did you play?
Yeah, we did. I
You're a
mean,
software guy,
apart
you
from
said. Computer guy,
uh,
right?
yeah, this is something I've said before, but I kind of like I left. I worked in computing for like 10, 11 years, and it was part of the reason that I was able to visualize this thing that thing I mentioned earlier, the play the game site on Channel Siberia. But for me, that was work, and although it was better than a lot of jobs, you kind of you were solving problems, and I'd be on call. I went in the middle of the night and fixed programs that had crashed and stuff. But when I decided this kind of romantic life that I was going to give all that up and hit the road, and just me and my bankroll and my pals and whatever, and we were going to live on our wits, and we could talk our way out of situations in situations. I loved all that, and like so then when they brought computing into, it was like being stalked by my ex. It was like, what are you doing here? I thought I got away from you, so I I could see. I mean, well, I think everyone could see how it was a big game changer, and how it was going to bring loads of people into the game, and it was very important. Um, it didn't necessarily instantly appeal to me as a lifestyle, to sit at a computer and play. But then again, we got involved. We got involved in sponsorship quite early on, and that so we were lucky enough to be involved in online poker from that side of things. And of course, then we played, and then there were good times to be playing. You didn't have to be that smart. You only have to. You only in poker, as you know, it's all about game selection, and you have to be maybe just a tiny bit smarter than the person sitting next to you,
Just a
or,
tiny
or a
bit.
bit luckier, or both. And so a lot. I was able to continue my life's project of getting by on as little as possible, a little effort as possible, and well, no, I mean I put a lot of effort into a lot of things, but not as in terms of actual poker and poker theory. I've been a bit lazy and a bit lucky, I think.
That's a good way to approach it. Read the early Sklansky books, The Theory of Poker, and all that. I'm sure they were popping up over there around the time Doyle's books were coming out, right? The Skolansky books, The
Yeah.
Theory of Poker. I don't know. Some people say I've talked to pros, hundreds of pros over the years that say I've never read a book, never done anything but just break down the experience like a jigsaw puzzle, figuring out and reverse engineering other players. So they've read every book. So a different path for everyone. But I have to talk
Well,
about one thing,
I'm in that. Sorry,
right?
I'm in that
You're in that
category of
category. Never
yeah.
read a book.
I'm not proud of it. I mean, I don't read enough books. I love to read, but I do read, and I don't read enough. But yeah, I mean, I have an attention span issue as well, and and things go in for me much more. They go in much better through my ears. I think that's I listen and I talk, and that's kind of how I learn stuff.
No, I think a lot of players did that. The young, especially these young guns I talked to, all in the early days, they got together in a house, five of the guys, and just talk hands all day. Same thing you did with your friends. I discovered some things about you when I was doing my research. Don't be scared, but I, it makes sense of you being a daredevil poker player that you are a bit of a daredevil. You do
Hmm.
skydiving, scuba
You know
diving.
what? I mean,
What's
I
that
have
about?
done that. No, I have done those things. None of them at all lately. I mean, actually, the and I can't remember the context in which those what those I gave somebody that information and it got written down and it became like a bigger part of I mean, of me than would really be. I mean, I have I have snowboarded and I mean I think the thing that I did ride motorbikes for a long time and that was probably the riskiest thing that I regularly did. Um, and I actually had a Guzzi uh, V65, which is an Italian police bike, quite a big, heavy, like low center of gravity bike. And my one still had a lot of the marking. It had the blue light on the front, what you're not supposed to use, and I did occasionally flick that on to get someone to move out of the way, which is a bit totally illegal, I think. But yeah, I think that I got a lot of that. Um, I do I mean, older and lazier now and less fit and all the rest of it. But I did always get a buzz out of doing things with an element of not necessarily mortal danger, but like a bit of an edge, and you had to think quickly and deal with what came along.
It makes sense. But let's see if this is a myth. I read that you did have a near-death experience on that motorcycle. Can you
Well,
talk about that?
um, I
Changed your
did.
life.
Um, yeah, I mean, because I was quite sporty before. I used to do Shotokan karate, which I really enjoyed, and I was generally had a lot of energy, very sporty. But and I was hit. I, I was broadsided by a drunken driver when I was on my bike, and who drove off and left me in the road, and that that was very scary. It did. I mean, it wasn't a near death experience. That's someone's exaggerated. It was quite it was quite serious, and my left leg was never really recovered
Uh,
from that, and it meant I could no longer do a lot of things that I wanted to do.
right.
Um, so that was a shame. But no, I don't think there was ever any question of it being anything other than quite a nasty, painful accident. It wasn't a near-death experience.
Okay. Wikipedia. I didn't know if you wrote it or if different people
No,
contribute to that.
I
I
didn't
did
write
want to
it.
talk. So, when did you begin your journey to come test your skills and bring the mob over to Las Vegas? Because you've won a couple of bracelets. Can you talk about your journey to Vegas and your experience early on playing the World
I
Series?
can. I mean,
Yeah, and you
the
finished 16th in the main event. I'm not sure if people know at one time.
yeah. Well, the first time actually I went to Vegas was with Ross, my brother, and we actually went over to the States to go to the Mardi Gras, and we then decided we were already like into poker a bit, but not particularly not tournament poker necessarily, but poker, and we decided to. We had a friend or I had a friend in San Francisco that we thought it would be good fun to go and visit. And we went over there and we hired a car and drove up through Yosemite and up to Vegas. And the plan was we were then going to go and drive down to Mexico and spend a little bit of time down there. But we went to the plaza and sat down in a high-low game, and we basically we sat in that game for, I'm going to say, certainly over 48 hours, quite a long time.
Yeah.
And we only got up when they comped us a meal, which we thought was amazing. We thought this meant that we were really arrived and we were really important. We didn't realise it was just that they were desperate for us not to leave. So we had a hotel room that we never went into, and I think it was probably more like 3 straight days that we played in this game, and we played until we were completely broke. And then we didn't even have the money to get our car out, because we were supposed to pay in those days to get your money out of the parking. And the guy phoned up and he said, oh, okay, fair enough. I see. And then let us go. So, we came, like Champagne Charlies, and we left, because by the goodness of their hearts, they let us leave without paying the parking fee. And then we realized that we had to average about 150 miles an hour to get back to LA, to get a flight back to New Orleans, to get the connecting flight back to London. So the trip kind of ended, but we still, we kind of romanticized it in our minds as we've been to Vegas and we've done all, we played in this game, we've met all these characters, and we've got a taste for it. And then the next thing that happened for me was that I won a kind of a competition, I guess, at my local card room, a place called the Stackers that isn't there anymore. That they gave points for the tournaments that you played, the small tournaments, and the person who won the most points over the year, the prize was a trip to Vegas to the World Series. And it was flights and accommodation at Binion's.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned up with very little money, but I had this trip, and I remember, I didn't even check in. I went straight into a cash game, started playing, and then I lost a bit of money, and then I went up to Treasure Island, I think it was, won a bit of money there, but then somehow when I went to my room, the money wasn't there anymore, and I don't know if I was pickpocketed or something. Basically, I kind of like I didn't go with very much anyway, and it wasn't successful. But it was when the World Series main event was on, and I remember wandering about on the first day and seeing guys that I knew from the Vic sitting there with $10,000 in chips in front of them. And I was like, wow, where did they get that kind of money? And then I saw Telly Savalas. He
Oh
was
yeah,
sitting there. And I was like, wow, this
Kojak.
what's going on. This is like, this is mad. This is like the movies. And I hung around and watched the main event. Um, and the next year I went back, and I knew that year to like check into my room first. That was something that, it's taken me like about 25 years, but bit by bit, I've learned how to be in Vegas. I've learned all the lessons, for myself. And that year, which was I think 1999, I played a multi-table satellite, $225 or something. I won a seat in the main event.
Wow.
And my friend Pascal Perrault, French player, he also did the same thing. And we were so excited that we were in the main event. We went down to the Voodoo Lounge and got really, really drunk to celebrate. We thought we were already the world champions, basically, because we were just by the fact that we were in the main event. And I ended up on day 2 getting knocked out by a guy called Willie Tan, who played. I used to play regularly down the Vic. But then, like you say, the following year, 2000, went back again, won my seat again,
Yep.
and was actually chip leader going into the money somehow. And were it not for one big mess up I did in the hand against Hassan Habib, I might have had a much better shot of going deeper. But I finished up losing a standard flip really when on the last 2 tables, but like I kind of like told myself then that I was never going to miss the main event. It was just so amazing, and so far I haven't. I don't think I've missed one.
I mean, how did it feel? I mean, the energy there, it's obviously before the big boom in 2003, but how many players were in that 2000 event, and how did it feel going so deep? You were 16th. What was first prize even? for the
First prize was 1 million.
Okay,
There were something like 650 players, I think, which seemed like a lot at the time.
right,
I think around about 50 or something got into the money, or 47 or something, whatever. It took, I think it took maybe a couple of days to get into the money, and then and then it was a couple of days more, something like that.
right,
It was probably 4 days in all, and um, I mean it was incredible. It was really exciting. It was a big deal back home. I was getting phone calls, and somebody sent me a bunch of flowers, and it was like people were watching. It was so it was a little bit like what happened in Paris a couple of weeks ago. It was like it was like Barney, that bloke we know from down the, who kind of like, who bluffs too much and cracks the odd joke. He's in the, he's like bookies' favourite to win the world. The big, there was only one 10K event a year back then. It wasn't,
right,
I mean, it was, I know it's still special, but it was more special then. And nobody, very few of us went out there then, so it was just to hear about someone you actually knew being out there, So it was like, I really felt, that it was very important, and very, very, very exciting. And I actually went back the following year and was for the second, it was the highest European finisher in the main event for the second year in a row. But like I went out a lot earlier. I went out like 35th or something like that on a flip, and so it wasn't a big deal in poker terms, but it was kind of like it was enough to keep my interest going, and to keep me believing that I could live at this rarefied level, and I carried on having enough hope. I mean, I think I heard a quote from Gramsci, who, I mean, not to trivialize a great philosopher talking under much more difficult circumstances, but he
right.
talked about uh, intelligent pessimism and yeah, pessimism of the intelligence, optimism of the will, something like that. Or it's kind of like um, the thing that Oscar Wilde said about the triumph of hope over experience. But basically, I carried on having this muscle memory
Right.
of going deep in the main event, and carried on believing, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that I was capable of becoming world champion. Um, and and I think now that I've had this big result in Paris, I think it's going to take another 10 years for for me to be ground back down by reality. It's like,
Uh,
I am a naturally optimistic person.
we'll talk about that. Going into that Paris event, how were you feeling? And then day one, as you went deeper each day, talk about your journey through that event to the amazing final table. Because I did watch a lot of your journey and definitely watched the final table.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because you don't know when you set off on a tour. I mean, I haven't been, barely played for various reasons, like family commitments and all sorts of reasons. I've barely played the European Poker Tour um, for a good 10 years. And then I've started playing last year, and I played Prague, and that didn't go well. And I went and played this one. And obviously, when you enter a tournament, you believe that you're supposed to be there, and you've got a chance and all the rest of it. But it didn't feel any different to a lot of other tournaments where I'd gone along and maybe min cashed or whatever. So I didn't go there with special expectations, but I went there knowing that if I played my game and things worked out, who knows? And actually, um, I was with my girlfriend, and I'd kind of promised her that I was going to play day 1A, and day 1B was going to be a day off, and we were going to go out and see Paris. And I actually had a bit of a nasty accident with my stack just before before dinner or whenever it was on day 1A, and because of that promise, partly, and also because I'm old and I need my rest. I decided to stick to the plan of not playing day 1B and to go back in after dinner and take my second bullet on day 1A, and that worked out. I mean, I finished up with double the starting stack, and that's fine in that event. But still with no, it didn't feel unusual. And and then for the next couple of days, I guess this is when my game. I like my game in the early stages of these tournaments. A lot less of there's a lot less kind of charts that tell you exactly what to do
Right.
in situations when it's deep. A lot more of it's experience, and I tend to have a kind of sort of paradoxical. I think in one way, it's a very defensive game where I try to keep pots small. I try not to get into big races, all the rest of it, and try not to turn over hands. And I'm happy. I know that sometimes I don't make the most out of a hand, but like when the chips are really going in, it's because I really want them to. And I know why so I do tend to build stacks a lot, slowly over time in those deep stack things, and it kind of like I had good times and bad times. I got away with it. I mean, I don't think I got into any flips before the final table, and that in itself is quite
That's
unusual. I'm pretty sure not a single flip, and those bluffs that I did make, I don't know, there are many of them, but I don't think any of them got looked up. And obviously, that's very lucky because it means that people just didn't have the hands to look you up. It was it was fairly smooth sailing, really. It's never complete, but obviously I can't remember every hand, but at the end of every day, I had a bit more than the day before, and I was keeping up with the pace, and it wasn't really. You probably know because you mentioned it to me when we were talking about doing this interview that there was a kind of real turning point hand right at the end of day 4, and it was really after that hand, or even during that hand, that I started thinking about the possibility of winning this tournament, because that was a hand where I called the guy down on free streets um, with top pair and a very mediocre kicker when he put maximum pressure on with what turned out to be a missed flush draw, and on the river when I've chatted to him and he's bet over pot, a little bit over pot to set me in, and I had time to think about I kind of made up my mind on the turn what his hand was. Um, in other circumstances, it's an easy call, but like there's obviously a lot at stake here. But I thought about the fact that because there's so much more at stake, he's actually more likely to make this play and think it's going to get through because he knows roughly what I've got, and I'm supposed to throw it away. ICM says I'm supposed to throw it away, whatever, and apparently, uh, and um, and I thought about the fact that I thought, well, you've been to these stages in these kind of tournaments so many times, and you will be again. And there's often a turning point, and sometimes you're not even aware of it. And sometimes you make a laydown that maybe was that if you hadn't made it down, you would have gone a lot further, or maybe you'd have gone out there and then. But like I know that I'm not 100%. I feel that I'm right. Everything about this guy's body language and about the way he's been playing and talking up until now tells me that he's the guy that's going to make this bet. And he's not. It's not a value bet. He's not trying to get me. He doesn't have an overpair. He's not trying to get. He hasn't played it that way. I know what's going on. I know he's betting a misdraw. And if I do call this and I'm right, I'm going to be run about the chip leader. We're going to go back 3 tables or 2 tables, whatever, and I really could get to the final with chips here and maybe even get a top 3 finish. And that was kind of that I remember all that flashing through my mind in about
wow.
10 seconds. And obviously, you look back at a hand that that people have talked about and it's been televised, and you can impose all these thoughts, and I don't exactly know what I really remember, and what's come up from me talking about it afterwards. Maybe I was just tired and I didn't, and I, like I said to him at the time, he said, "How could you call?" And I said, I'm tired. I want to go to bed. Maybe that was true. I mean, but I don't. But I do remember thinking, wow, if I'm right about this, this is a real shot.
Right.
And so that was that was in that sense. It's not necessarily poker wise the most interesting hand to talk about, but certainly for me in my journey, that was the pivotal moment.
No, I remember. I mean, do you remember what you said? Because I think Joe Stapleton, one of my favorite people in the game, and I was watching and I yelled because he say something like, "Well, that was for your tournament life. How did you call?" And you said something hilarious that everybody just loved.
Well, I
Do
said, well, it's true. I said, well, yeah, but it's just my tournament life. It's not my actual life. You know, no one's going to. I'm not stepping off, not walking the plank into a sea full of shark. I mean, it's like people use that expression, your tournament life, um, as if it's so consequential. Well, it is, but like if you're not prepared to risk your tournament life, you can't win a tournament.
no,
And so I kind of find he was almost he was kind of complimenting me and kind of berating me. He was kind of telling me that I wasn't supposed to make this call,
right.
that because it was for my tournament life and look was at stake, And he said, and it's 10 minutes before the end of the day, like that mattered. It's 2 days before the end of the tournament, not 10 minutes before the end of the day. So that was my instant response. But it was my tournament life. Yeah, what? So
Not my
what?
real life. Wasn't this
Yeah.
wasn't this a meta game between the two you guys anyway, kind of poking each other a bit? Or
Well,
was he being the
I
one
don't
poking?
know. I mean, he's someone who likes to be a personality at the table, and it obviously must work for him because he's had big results. He's won like 3 WPT titles or something. This guy,
Right.
which I didn't know at the time. But one of the things I think that he does is he tries to kind of create these bonds with other players, um, and maybe I'm doing him a disservice. Maybe he really liked me or something. But I felt like it was a bit bogus, and that I didn't really want to go. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go down. I didn't want to play into his thing of like, oh, you and me, we're and you. I wouldn't bluff you, and you wouldn't bluff me. Well, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play the game. So whenever he tried to do a bit of that, I sort of resisted it. But I hope in a friendly way, not in a really combative way. But I think that like that hand itself, he kind of it was tough. I mean, like, I empathise because it's not like I haven't bluffed off all my chips in the tournament. You know,
Right.
and it was he did something in a way I thought was quite smart. Which was there were 10 minutes to the end of the day. He was now under the gun with obviously no hand, and he just used up all his time things to not have to play any more hands because he didn't trust himself not to blow up. I
Oh,
mean, I think it's kind of weird that because you can throw your hands away if you don't want to play them, and you can whatever, and you might get dealt aces, whatever. But like you know, as far as I knew, this wasn't against the rules. I understand now maybe it was, but like no one was saying it's against the rules, and I I sympathised,
yeah.
with having gone from 1 minute he's big chip leader at the table, probably in the tournament. He's about to go to bed chip leader. Now he's flopped a big flop, which if he hits, he's going to get all my chips or a lot of them. And then he's made this big move that's supposed to work, and all of a sudden, it's all gone wrong, and he's kind of berated me. And then I came back with that remark, and everybody laughed. So that maybe he felt a bit humiliated by that. He shouldn't have done, but maybe he did. I don't know. But there wasn't, as far as I'm concerned, there was no big issue between me and him. I mean, it was fun to remark on his choice of clothing. He was very purple that day, and that uh, that was unusual and worth commenting on. But like, but no, I mean, I don't think there was. I mean, they like to play these things up, but I like to engage with everybody. I enjoy chatting at the table, and I didn't have any problem with him.
No, I didn't think you did, but it was just a great remark. I've never heard that before, and Joe loved it. Talk about so
Yeah.
waking up. Was it the next day? Was the final table after that day? Right,
No,
2 more days.
no. The next day, I didn't wake up because I didn't go to sleep.
Uh,
I have. I
okay,
mean,
okay.
I have a lot. I have a lot of trouble sleeping anyway. At the best of times, I've been an insomniac all my life, and this is the thing about Vegas, which is so painful, is because I never get over the jet lag the whole time I'm there. But like that that night, I literally didn't sleep. So I went to day five, um, the chip leader in the whole tournament, but knowing that there was a whole day to play
Yeah,
before we even got to the final, and knowing that being chip leader, was no guarantee of anything, and being really, really quite tired. I think I probably reined myself in a little bit, tried to avoid um, doing things which were going to land me with difficult higher wire decisions,
right.
uh, and possibly didn't use my stack as much as I might have done on other days. But maybe I guess it really worked for me. I did build a bit over the course of the day, and I think that um, I was in top three at the end of the day. There was a couple of guys who just had a little bit more than me, but not much, and we were the three that it looked like would probably wind up the last three, and that's what happened. So it kind of felt like it was all going to plan, and the night before the final, somebody actually gave me a sleeping pill. I did get some sleep, and that made a big difference. I went to day six a lot more rested
That's good.
than I went to day five, and then I've got to be honest. I mean, I think I made the most of the good hands that I got, and that was important. But boy, did I get some good hands
You
when we
did.
were
I
free
mean, did
handed.
you have a game plan going into the final table at all? Did you just going to just ride the flow?
I mean, you kind of like, I suppose it's a bit like Groundhog Day. You keep getting there, and you make a mistake, and you go, right. Well, I won't make that mistake again, and you go out in fifth, and then the next time you don't make that mistake, and you make another one, or you get unlucky or outplay, whatever. But like I'd been in big tournament finals with or last two tables or whatever where there's $1 million plus prizes many times. I can't even list them. Every time I try and list them, I forget a couple. And I've won tournaments. I've won reasonably major tournaments, which back in the day were the biggest tournaments in Europe. But like I've never won $1 million first prize or close. The biggest one was 560,000 on my bracelet in Vegas.
Right.
So on the one hand, I was quite comfortable about being in this situation, and I knew a lot of the pitfalls to avoid, I guess. But it was what was clear was that there was kind of two divisions at the table. There were the three of us who had all the chips, and the three that were very short. And whereas any one of those three could have gone on a run,
Right.
usually, we're going to be the last three. And I think all three of us made sure that's what happened. And that was, and it happened fairly quickly. And then, there was, I was probably coming third out of the three, but not by that much. But the German guy who finished up second, I think he had a decent chip lead. But I had a hand with him, which was which was the biggest by far pot that got played until right at the end, I guess. And this was me making the most out of a good hand, I think, because I'd limped in the small blind with 10-7 suited. It's come 7-7, um, 7 7-7-9, I think.
Okay.
So I've got, I've got obviously I've got a huge hand, and I led out small. I thought, if he's, he's not going to read anything into this bet. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this on this board a lot, whatever I've got. And if he's got anything, if he's got two overs, whatever he's got, if he's got a gut shot, don't matter. He's calling one bet. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna get something out of him. I'll be very unlucky if I don't. If he's got deuce three off and he just throws it away, okay, that could happen. So I did, and he did call, and the turn came a 10, which gave me a house. And I thought, well, okay, now the story is I tried it once, it didn't work, I'm giving up. That's my story. Or I haven't got that much, and and I've only got enough to maybe check call, but certainly not to check raise or to lead out. So I checked, and he bet, and I thought for quite a long time and called. And on the river, it came an eight of hearts, which brought a possible straight, a possible flush, and if somehow he had a house, it was going to be uh, sevens full of some. I had the biggest other card on the board, so if he had sevens full, I was bigger than him. So
Right.
that would be the dream. If he had somehow had 7-8, and he filled up. I was pretty sure he didn't have a pocket pair, so I wasn't worried about him having a bigger house than me. So it was just how do I get paid now? And I thought if I put in a kind of stoppery bet, that looks like I've got maybe I just flopped the 10 or something like that, and I just want to get paid, by an 8, whatever, I'll put in a very small bet. Maybe he'll either have enough to call that, or he'll have enough to raise, or he'll have a little enough to raise because he'll think that I'm not strong enough, and that's what happened. He stuck in a huge raise, and his hand was sevens and eights. That was his hand, and he obviously felt like he didn't have enough showdown value just to call me, but I was weak enough that he could push me off the hand. So by playing it the way that I did, and by him having what he had, and the board running out the way it did, all those things, most three quarters of it pure luck. I won this huge pot, which again was another turning point. That was the point at which I went from 2 days before thinking, "Wow, I might make the final," to thinking, "Wow, I'm actually chip leader here, and I know what to do. You know,
Right.
I know to attack the guy who's got a bit more than the other guy, a bit more, and to kind of chip away at them and put them under the pressure the whole time. And there's no hurry. I can sit here. I'm relaxed. I'm rested. I know what to do. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think I don't feel like I'm at a disadvantage here. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe I was at a huge disadvantage. Maybe they were much smarter than me. They know a lot more. And if I don't hit a lot of great cards, maybe and certainly I hit another couple of really good hands. I mean, I lost two big flips in along the way against the other guy, the guy who came third. So it didn't all go my way, but then immediately after losing a huge pot with like ace queen against nines, I immediately flopped a set of nines and got it all back, against top pair. And so it kind of like, it just, I wasn't really put under. From when we went free-handed, when I won that pot with 10-7, life was easy for me. I didn't have any really tough decisions. It was just a case of oh, I've got this. How do I get the most out of it? And maybe ducking out of things I didn't need to be in, and knowing which one of them to pressure at any given point. And
Right.
I've been in those kind of spots enough times and made enough mistakes in the past. And I wasn't thinking about the money really. I was thinking about winning. I want to win this tournament.
Well, talk about that a bit, because I've read some quotes, and you won. I don't know if people know, over $1.2 million, your biggest cash, compared to your 500,000 for your bracelet in Vegas for the World Series. You said this doesn't feel like real life. When did you come down? How, that feeling we've all experienced in those kind of moments. That's an amazing moment for you, especially with so many people in your history in the game. It had to be quite. Have you come down from that yet? Is it real life yet?
Um, Yes and no. So I mean, what happened was he asked me, didn't he? Stapes asked me, about that thing that I'd said about the, the my real my actual life, my tournament life, and I said that in that moment I couldn't really distinguish between the two, and it just didn't feel real. I knew I just won this big tournament, but it hadn't really sunk. You don't know how much these things are going to mean to you till they happen, and I'm surprised. I surprised myself with how much it does mean to me in a way. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I've been trying to do it for years, but like how much it viscerally
Uh,
got to me. And how emotional I felt. I didn't really expect that, and yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot of things, not least of which is that Poker Stars, who run these amazing events all over Europe, have got me involved, and this is fantastic because I know so many of these people, and they really are the best. Not only the events that suit me the best, but they really are the best events. And I have been playing in that many of them for quite a long time. I mean, I was there at the beginning of the European Poker Tour and played a lot of them back in the day. And there was a big gap when I barely played for all sorts of reasons. And so to be back, having that life and playing in all the tournaments that I really want to play in, and being with a lot of even the guy who runs the security is Tony. He's a really good mate of mine. We've been on holiday together, and he's always there. And a lot of obviously a lot of the players, a lot of the dealers. Toby Stone, who was the tournament director, I've known him around for a long time. We get on really well. It's a really good sign of any organisation when people stick around, and it really is. I will say, I mean, I love the World Series. The World Series will always be the most special thing to me. But there are things that it's possible for them to do in Europe. It's much harder because the World Series is this big circus that goes on once a year, and all of a sudden, everybody from everywhere comes, and they've got to magic up all these dealers and tournament directors and just physical space, and it's almost impossible. And they do their best, and in many ways they get better every year. But I noticed at the end of 6 days of play in Paris, I'd never seen a tournament director. I'd never heard anyone call for a ruling, and this was because everybody knew exactly what they were doing.
right.
And the dealers were all, without exception, really, really good. And to have all that in a comfortable space in a beautiful city, and run on hours that suit you, and with time to go and get a nice meal at a decent dinner break, and to have all that, and to have a really good deep stack tournament with a lot of play in it that really rewards all the things that you try to bring to the game. And now to realise that I'm going to be doing that 5 times a year if I do nothing else, that is
Right.
so brilliant. And I won't do nothing else. I'll do a lot else, but so it's changed my life massively, in all sorts of practical ways. And I'm looking for a nicer house,
That's nice.
and there's also there's I've been able to do a couple of things for a couple of people that it's nice to be able to do for them, and that's always great. That's always a treat, when you can help somebody out, and so it's there's all sorts of little things. But I'm still me. It wasn't. At my age, it's not because I haven't suddenly become a better player. I haven't suddenly become a different person. I have, I've got £1 million that I didn't have before, and that's massive.
That's always
Um,
good.
but and I've got a gig that I didn't have before with with the best online site. And that's great with PokerStars. Um, but it hasn't. There's lots of things that hasn't changed as well.
Of course.
And
I
I
was going
still,
to bring you
my
brought
knees
up.
still ache when I get up in the morning. Yes.
What's that? You do what in the morning?
I said my knees still ache when I get up in
Uh,
the morning. I'm still the same miserable old git that I was last week. But
well,
it's
You brought up PokerStars. I'm glad you did. One of my favorite brands. I've put this first set I ever played on. I'm glad you talked about them. I'm excited for you being a brand ambassador. But our editor, Dave Woods, had a great question for you. A couple questions to wind up the wonderful interview with you. How often do you stay in contact with the guys at the Hendon Mob, and will you guys play an event together again?
Well, this is a very good question. One of them I'm in absolutely constant contact with, and with his children and his partner and everybody, but because that's my brother Ross, and we're very very close. And he has a very successful career as an actor, and he's currently in one of the biggest, longest running soaps, and so he doesn't get a lot of time for other things. But we're cooking up a plan that he's begging his employers to let him come to the World Series main event this year, and I'm hoping that's going to happen. They still haven't said yes or no. I know that Barcelona this year is the 20th anniversary of the EPT, and all four of us were at the first one,
Wow.
and the whole first tour, I'm sure. Um, and this is one of the things about being involved with stars, because like I say, it's not just that they're the best software and that you can trust them, and all the things that are really good about it as a site. But for me, it goes really deep. For me, it's like these were the people that took the European poker tour and made sure it was successful and that it grew, and they brought players to it and they ran it in the right way. So all the stuff that I love about the live game, I also associate with PokerStars more than any other site. So it makes sense for me to be involved. And to go back to your question, I'm kind of like I'm floating the idea, that maybe uh, if not if this is too soon, Barcelona's too soon, maybe at another event. But the whole Hendon mob should show up
I think so too.
at one of these events, and it would be perfect if it was to help celebrate the 20th anniversary. But maybe it could be the first one of the 21st year or whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
I think that that those three are all like me. We're all part of the history of European poker, and PokerStars is kind of ensuring the health and the legacy and all the rest of it. And I know that they've got the imagination that they would see that would be a good thing to do.
I think so too. One last question before we wrap up. So everybody's asked me, so ask him this. What's the secret of your longevity in the game?
Well, you know what? Somebody asked me a while ago, and it occurred to me that I probably haven't played as much as a lot of people much younger than me. So, partly, I think maybe I've just stretched out a career over more time while I've been doing other things. But I think that also, I love the game. I think that there's other things I could be doing. You know, if I didn't, I could still be in computing, for example, and making a decent living. But you only get one life, and I really enjoy it, and I enjoy the traveling and meeting people and making friends all over the world. And I'm curious. I like to learn. I bring the same approach to it as I bring to like learning a language or many other things in life, where I'm more conscious of what I don't know than what I do know. I'm interested in what other people have got to say. Um, I'm always trying to think of new things, and so it keeps it fresh. So I'm lucky that I'm kind of like, even though I'm old and achy and I moan about that, but actually I'm quite well, for my age, and so that obviously helps. And maybe it's just I haven't got anything better to do. I don't know. But like I'm still enjoying it. That's the main thing. As long as I enjoy it, and I don't see why I shouldn't carry on doing it.
No, I think that's wonderful. Thank you for your time, Barney Boatman. We're going to see you. I think you're going to get quite a reception in Las Vegas this time around when you show up to play.
Yeah, it's it's a bit double edged. I'm coming out a bit later than I normally would, because one of the things I've got this. there's a couple of other countries in Europe that I've got strong connections with. One of them's Ireland, and I insist that I'm in many ways I am an Irish player, and which is really good because I'm now on the top of the Irish rankings, if
Oh,
that's the case.
okay.
But also I have a very strong connection with Spain, and I've spent a lot of time living in both in Barcelona and more recently in Madrid, and I've got a lot of friends there, and um, so I wanted to be involved in the Estrellas tour as well, the Spanish tour, and they're having an event in Malaga, south of Spain, in June, which is going to be a joint event between the UK IPT and Australia. So it's going to be a British Spanish production, and it kind of makes a lot of sense for me to be there. I want to be there for the first one of those. So that means that I won't go out to the World Series until way later than I would recently have done. Um, but I will be there from about like the 19th of June, something like that.
Right.
And certainly I'll be there for the main event and for the 10K PLO. And I'm probably going to play something I've never played yet.
Uh-oh.
This is my one treat that I promised myself because of this big win. I'm going to play the 25K PLO.
Wow.
I love PLO. Everyone tells me it's a really good tournament. I've never really felt it. I could, I had the kind of bankroll that justified um, playing a tournament where you could be out in 1 minute with a top set against a wrap or whatever. But now I kind of feel like if I don't play it this year, I never will, and so I'm looking forward to playing that. But I'm also hoping to play. I mean, the first thing I'll play will be the Millionaire Maker.
Okay.
That's 2 days after I land, and I was actually in the final of that a few years ago. Had a really decent shot, and I know that's a really good. That's the kind of that goes over a longer period of time than most of the smaller buy-in events, and you can win $1 million
Of
for
course.
$1,500. So it's I'm really looking forward to that, and that's I guess when I'm going to see a lot of the people that I know.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Barney Boatman, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to interview one of the legends and icons in the game. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.